When my son died, his wife inherited the house and $118 million. Then she threw me out and screamed, "Get out of my house!" But she had no idea I'd already gathered every piece of evidence of her cruelty. A few days later, the lawyer arrived and read the will aloud. When she heard what it said, she crumpled to the floor because she had just lost everything. Welcome back to His Hidden Revenge. I'm glad you found your way here. If this is your first time with us, tap subscribe, so the next story comes straight to you. Before we go further, are you listening on headphones right now or through a speaker? I always wonder, because a story this close to the heart feels different depending on how it reaches you. One quick note, some details in this story have been dramatized for the telling. Any resemblance to real people or events is purely coincidental. It's the meaning underneath that I hope stays with you. 2 weeks. It had been exactly 2 weeks since I'd buried my boy, and I still couldn't accept that Donovan was truly gone. Elliot Farrow sat across from me, hands folded on his walnut desk. He'd been Donovan's attorney for 5 years, handling all the business paperwork for Callaway Dynamics. A solid man, the kind you want in your corner when everything falls apart. "Warren," he said softly, sliding a thick folder in my direction. "Donovan was very deliberate about the timing. He wanted you to go over his will exactly 2 weeks after his passing." I stared at that folder like it was a trap. My son's final wishes reduced to clauses in paper. It felt all wrong. "He came to see me in January," Elliot went on. "January 15th. You were in Arizona visiting your sister, if I recall." My head snapped up. January. This past January. Yes, that was right. Donovan had pushed me to take that trip, told me he'd be perfectly fine running the company on his own. Only now did I understand why he'd been so insistent about getting me out of town. He knew I whispered. He already knew he was sick. Elliot gave a slow nod. The diagnosis came back on January 8th, stage 4 pancreatic cancer. 6 to 9 months, the doctors had told him. The room seemed to tilt. Donovan had carried that weight for 2 months, while I'd wandered around oblivious, swelled with pride over how well his company was performing. "Why didn't he tell me?" "He wanted to protect you," Elliot said. "He told me that watching you worry would hurt him worse than the cancer itself." I pressed my palms hard against my eyes. There'd be time to fall apart later. Right now, I needed to understand what my son had set in motion. "Show me." Elliot opened the folder and took me through the will. Thorough, meticulous, pure Donovan, but one detail stopped me cold. "Wait, what did you say about Renata?" Elliot cleared his throat. "Donovan has left his entire estate to establish the Callaway Memorial Scholarship Foundation. However, he's included provisions for Renata Voss to receive everything, instead, provided she meets certain conditions over 1 year. What kind of conditions? She must demonstrate what Donovan called adherence to family values and personal integrity. There are financial monitors, behavioral clauses, verification processes. If Mrs. Voss fulfills all requirements for 12 months, the estate transfers to her. If she violates any clause, everything goes to the scholarship fund immediately." I sat back, my mind turning over fast. This wasn't just a will, it was a test. My son had built an elaborate mechanism to prove something, but what? "Elliot, I don't understand. Donovan loved that girl. Why would he? I can't speak to his reasons, Warren. I only know he spent 30 days constructing this with absolute precision. 3 separate attorneys reviewed it to make sure it would hold up in court. Whatever drove him, he believed this mattered." My thoughts drifted back to the home I'd sold in 2017, the house where Donovan had grown up, where Elaine and I had raised him after she passed. I'd gotten $163,000 for it, and I'd handed every dollar to my son to help him launch Callaway Dynamics. I'd believed in him that much. He'd turned that faith into a multi-million-dollar company. Now, even from beyond the grave, he was leaving me another puzzle to work through. Elliot reached into his desk drawer and produced a smaller envelope, ivory sealed with black wax. My name was written across hand. "He left this for you." His instructions were plain. "You're only to open it once you've finished reading the will." My hands shook as I reached for it. The envelope was heavier than it looked, like it held more than paper, more than words. "What's inside?" I asked, though I already knew he wouldn't say. Elliot just shook his head, his expression quiet with understanding. "That's between you and your son." I pressed the envelope to my chest and felt the weight of it settle there. Donovan had always been 3 steps ahead of everybody else. Even now, especially now, he was still guiding me, still pointing me towards some answer I hadn't grasped yet. The black wax seal was smooth beneath my thumb. Whatever truth Donovan had meant for me to find inside it was going to change everything. I just didn't know by how much. The parking lot was nearly empty when I made it back to my truck. The late afternoon sun came in low through the windshield, turning everything gold. I sat there with the engine off that ivory envelope in my hands. I couldn't wait. Not until I got home. Not another minute. My fingers broke the black wax seal. Inside was a single sheet folded twice. Donovan's handwriting filled both sides neat and precise, the way it always was. Dad, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry for keeping the illness from you. I couldn't stand the thought of watching you watch me fade. You've already lost Mom. I couldn't put you through losing me slowly, too. There's something else you need to know. My hands started shaking. I discovered the truth about Renata 6 months before I passed away. September, to be exact. I found messages on her phone, nothing dramatic. Just a notification that lit up while we were having dinner. A message from someone named Bryce. Bryce. I didn't know any Bryce. I didn't confront her right away. I hired an investigator, Garrett Nolan. Elliot has his contact information. What Garrett found Dad, it had been going on for over a year. The whole time I was building the company, working 80-hour weeks to give us a better life, she was. The word betrayal never appeared on the page, but it hung over every line. I know what you're thinking. Why didn't I just leave her? Why set up these conditions instead of cutting her off completely? Because I still believe in redemption. Dad, you taught me that. Remember when I was 16 and took money from your wallet for concert tickets? You didn't just punish me. You sat me down and asked me who I wanted to be, someone who grabbed shortcuts, or someone who earned what he wanted. That conversation changed my life. So, I'm giving Renata the same choice. 1 year to prove whether she loved me for who I was, or for what I could provide. 1 year to show whether she can live with integrity when people are watching. If she comes through, she deserves the inheritance. It means something real was there. If she fails well, at least some good will come of it. Kids who need a chance will get one. Kids like I was before you sold everything to bet on my dream. My vision blurred. I hadn't cried in Elliot's office. I'd held myself together. But here alone in my truck, my son's words in my hands, I let it go. Deep heaving sobs that shook my shoulders and made my chest ache. Donovan had known. For 6 months he'd carried that betrayal alongside the cancer, the illness consuming him from inside, and the knowledge that his wife had already left him long before his body began to fail, sitting right there with it. And he'd never breathed a word to me. I love you, Dad. I'm proud of who you are and who you helped me become. Don't carry any blame for this. You gave me everything a father could give. Your son, always Donovan. I sat there until the sun dropped lower, painting the Ohio sky in shades of purple and pink, until the tears dried on my face and left my skin tight and raw. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. Dad, we need to talk about the will. Can we meet? This isn't fair to me. Renata. I stared at those words, at the sheer nerve of them arriving just hours after Elliot had read her the terms. She had no idea what I knew, no idea I was holding her lies in my hands, written in my son's careful script. This isn't fair to me. I thought about Donovan carrying his secrets alone, working past midnight while his wife traded messages with another man, dying quietly so I wouldn't have to watch. And Renata wanted to talk about fair. I turned the key and pulled out of the lot without answering. The envelope rested on the passenger seat beside me, Donovan's words still warm from where I'd held them pressed to my chest. Some conversations could wait. 3 days after the funeral, I finally agreed to meet her. The coffee shop sat right at the edge of Hoover Reservoir, floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over gray water. Renata had suggested it as neutral ground, she'd called it, as if we were hammering out a business deal rather than discussing my son's final wishes. I arrived early and took a table by the window. The reservoir stretched out beneath an overcast sky, restless and still. March in Ohio, never quite decided between winter and spring. Renata walked in right on time, dressed in black from head to toe. Designer sunglasses perched on her head despite the clouds. She'd always had a taste for the dramatic. Donovan used to laugh about it, said it was part of her charm. I wasn't laughing now. Dad. She leaned in to kiss my cheek. I didn't pull back, but I didn't move toward her either. She smelled of expensive perfume and something edged with desperation. Gestured to the chair. Coffee, I'm fine. She sat folded her hands on the table. Her wedding ring caught what little light came through the glass. Thank you for meeting me. I know this has been difficult. I let that sit, said nothing. Silence does its own work most people can't stand. It feel compelled to speak. Renata made it about 10 seconds. Dad, I just don't get it. That slight tremor was back in her voice. Why would Donovan set things up this way? Hand everything over to some foundation, tie it all to these strange hoops I have to jump through. I was his wife. We were in that life side by side. I wanted to say, were you there or were you off somewhere with Bryce? I kept my expression closed. Donovan had his reasons. What reasons, though? A whole year of what did Elliot call it? Adhering to family values. A short, hard laugh. What is that supposed to mean exactly? I love my husband. I stood beside him through everything, except the part that actually counted, I thought. The will doesn't leave room for interpretation, Renata. Hold to the terms for 12 months and the whole estate is yours. The business, the shares, the investments. And if I don't, I walk away with nothing. It all goes to a scholarship fund. Exactly right. She chewed her lower lip. For just a moment, she looked small, unguarded, almost like the young woman Donovan had introduced to me 5 years ago, eager and uncertain. Almost. And how exactly do I get through that year financially? Just the upkeep on the house alone. Elliot will arrange a monthly allowance of $2,400. Her eyebrows shot up. $2,400 a month, Dad? I can barely... Most households would stretch that, I said, keeping my voice level. Groceries, bills, gas all covered. You keep the Fort Collins house mortgage-free property taxes taken care of. Nobody's leaving you destitute. Behind her eyes, though, I could see the math she was running. $2,400 measured against the life she'd settled into. The boutique runs the spa afternoons, the designer things Donovan bought without blinking. This has nothing to do with money, she said. We both understood that was false. It's about being treated with dignity, like a widow, not some defendant who has to earn her own life back. I thought of Donovan's letter, of him grinding through 80-hour weeks while she was messaging someone else, carrying every secret by himself, not one word of complaint. If your love for my son was genuine, I told her, then a single year to honor what he asked isn't much. Something moved behind her face, fury or maybe dread. She tucked it away fast, replaced it with an air of injured grace. I loved him. That was never in question. She rose straight in that black dress. Fine, I'll fulfill every last condition. And when that year ends, I'll show everybody that I was the wife Donovan deserved. She scooped up her purse and slung it over one shoulder. Hand on the door, she glanced back. I hope you're at peace with this, Dad, putting me through a trial like I've done something wrong. Donovan wouldn't have wanted me treated this way. The door closed behind her, and she was gone. I stayed at the table, eyes on the water. The server drifted over twice. I sent him away both times. Renata had gotten one thing right. This wasn't what Donovan would have chosen, but it was what he'd needed to find out. And now, the knowing fell to me. A week passed before Elliot phoned. Something guarded in his voice, deliberate, the register he used when the conversation was going to cost something. Warren, I'd like you to come into the office. There's material here you should look at. I already sensed what it was before I arrived. The assistant walked me straight through. Elliot sat behind his desk laptop, open in front of him, a thick manila folder off to the side, the same one he'd kept tucked in a drawer the day we read the will. Sit, he said, and something in the gentleness of it made my chest tight. I sat. Back in early January, Donovan retained a private investigator, Garrett Nolan, based out of Cincinnati. Careful, methodical, good reputation. The assignment was simple: capture everything. Elliot swiveled the laptop so the screen faced me. Here's what Garrett turned up. A photograph filled the screen. Renata and a man I'd never seen seated at an outdoor table, fingers interlaced between them. The body language was unmistakable. Timestamp, August 23rd, 2022. Who is that? Bryce Holman. 32 years old, works for a marketing firm in Denver. The two of them crossed paths at a gallery opening in mid-August. Elliot advanced to the next image. Second time they met. September 5th. A different place. Bryce's hand curved against Renata's cheek. Click. September 20th. The two of them stepping inside the Oxford Hotel downtown, her head resting against his shoulder. Click, click, click. The photographs didn't stop. October bled into November, into December. 2 meetings a week, sometimes more. Venues I recognized, tables Donovan had reserved for analys and brass-handled doors. My grip on the armrests tightened. Donovan stumbled onto it by accident. Elliot said, his voice low. A message came in while they were eating dinner. He caught the name on the screen, read the preview. That was when he picked up the phone and called Garrett. What date? January 3rd. The cancer diagnosis followed 5 days after that. Elliot brought a timeline up on screen. Garrett didn't waste time. Inside of 2 weeks, he had a solid record. Donovan walked into this office on the 15th carrying all of it, and the two of us built the will across the next 30 days. I sat looking at the screen, at my son's wife lit up and laughing beside a man who wasn't him. At the calendar spread across months during which Donovan was running himself ragged, trying to build something they could both live inside. Did he say anything to her? No. Garrett counseled against it, legal exposure, and Donovan Elliott stopped himself. He said he didn't want to close the door on her, that even knowing what he knew, he thought people were capable of better if you put the right thing in front of them. The conditions, right, Elliott said. The conditions? He shut the laptop and moved it out of the way. There's one more thing, Warren. Garrett hasn't stopped. My head came up. I'm sorry, Donovan funded a full year of monitoring. The contract goes through March 2024. Garrett submits weekly reports where she goes, how she's spending money, who she's seen with. Every bit of it falls within the oversight clause of the will. Has she reached out to Bryce since Donovan died? Elliot laid a hand on the folder, found the tab dated this week. Nothing face-to-face, but there's electronic activity, encrypted apps, the kind that wipe themselves. Garrett can't pull the content. He can only confirm the contact is happening. My stomach turned over. She's still in touch with him. 4 days ago was the last activity. 4 days. 2 days after we'd sat across from each other at that table by the water. 2 days after she'd held my gaze and pledged to prove herself. Elliot slid the folder across to me. Dense and heavy photographs, dates, locations, signed witness accounts. A documented year of betrayal, organized like a case file. Go through it at whatever pace you need, he said. None of this is easy to absorb. Easy. There was nothing easy in any corner of this. Not Donovan's letter, not standing graveside, not watching Renata perform her grief across a coffee shop table. I opened the cover, first page, a summary. Names, dates, addresses reduced to tidy columns. Cold, precise language that flattened a marriage into data points. But behind the data was my son's shattered heart. Behind every timestamp and GPS coordinate was what Donovan had been too generous to say. Directly, she had never really been his. I didn't drive home. I sat in Elliot's parking lot for a full 20 minutes, folder on the seat beside me, before I finally pulled out and headed back to the rental in Columbus. 2 bedrooms, functional furniture, nothing extra. The kind of place you land in when you've cashed out everything to back someone you believed in. Not one day had I regretted doing that until tonight. I brewed coffee that went cold, untouched, switched on every light in the kitchen, and spread Garrett Nolan's investigation across the table like a prosecutor laying out exhibits. The man organized his work by date. Rigorous, nothing missed. Every encounter had a timestamp, a location, a photograph to anchor it. Donovan hadn't cut corners when he hired someone he'd found the best. August 15th, 2022. Curation Gallery, Denver. 7:30 p.m. Subject Voss entered unaccompanied, wearing a red dress. Made contact with Bryce Holman at the wine bar. Exchange lasted 47 minutes. Phone numbers exchanged. I moved to the next page. August 23rd, 2022. Mercantile Dining and Provisions, Denver. 8:15 p.m. Subject Voss and Holman seated together. 2 hours. Physical contact throughout. Hands joined across the table. Close conversation. Subject left in her own vehicle but maintained text contact during the drive. Phone records attached. September 5th, 2022. Jack's Fish House, Fort Collins. 7:45 p.m. Subject Voss arrived ahead of time. Holman came in, carrying flowers. Table for 3 hours. Repeated physical contact. Subjects left the premises together in Holman's car. The flowers. Bryce had shown up with flowers while Donovan was still at his desk, putting in the late hours. September 20th, 2022. The Oxford Hotel, Denver. Check-in at 6:30 p.m. Both subjects together. Stayed overnight. Checked out at 11 a.m. the next day. Photographs attached. Renata in the hotel lobby, relaxed and smiling. Bryce steering her toward the elevator with a hand resting at the base of her spine. Her face tipped up toward his, wearing the expression I'd only ever seen her give Donovan in their wedding pictures. I had to set the pages down, closed my eyes, and just held still for a moment. But the record continued. October, November, December. 2 meetings a week, occasionally 3. The venues rotated. The hotel didn't. The Oxford was the constant. Room 318 always. Garrett flagged it specifically. Donovan would have read that line and understood immediately. Room 318. A room they'd claimed as their own. Things shifted come January, which were deliberate. January 3rd, 2023. Subject Calloway Donovan contacted this office at 11:47 p.m., requesting immediate surveillance spouse. Submitted phone records as basis. Full 12-month retainer paid. January 5th, 2023. First surveillance confirmed. Subject Voss met Holman at Table 6 Denver. Duration 3 hours. January 8th, 2023. Subject Calloway received cancer diagnosis. Stage 4, pancreatic. Prognosis 6 to 9 months. January 15th, 2023. Subject. Calloway met with attorney Elliot Farrow. Will drafting began. I sat there staring at those dates. Donovan had gotten the diagnosis on the 8th. By the 15th, he was already sitting across from Elliot, building this whole architecture of conditions and consequences. 30 days. That's what Elliot had said. Donovan had spent 30 days of whatever life remained, while he was still clear-headed enough to think to plan, to hope designing this trial for Renata. Not as punishment. His letter had been plain about that. He wanted to hand her a choice. One detail in Garrett's January notes stopped me cold. Subject Calloway declined recommendation to confront spouse directly, stated, "I want to believe she can be better than this. I want to give her a reason to try." Something blurred behind my eyes. I closed the folder and pushed it aside. Donovan had seen all of it. Every photograph, every date, every time stamp. He'd understood in full what his wife had been doing, and what he'd answered with wasn't fury, wasn't vengeance, it was something closer to grace. He'd constructed a way back for her, knowing she might never take it, knowing it would likely tear something open in him all over again. That was my son. That was who I'd raised, a man who held on to the idea that people could be redeemed even when they'd given him every reason to abandon that belief. I thought about Renata at the reservoir complaining about the money, bristling at the idea of being assessed. She had no sense of the gift Donovan had handed her. Whether she'd see it in time, that was the only question that mattered. The first monitoring report landed in early April, exactly 4 weeks after Donovan was gone. I was at my kitchen table when Elliot rang. Warren, the initial compliance report just came through. I'm sending it over now, but let me walk you through it first. I pulled up the email on my laptop. The document was a different animal from Garrett's earlier investigation, less intrusive, trained on observable public conduct. This was the formal oversight Donovan had woven into the will itself. What does it say? Elliot's voice carried cautious relief. Honestly, she's doing better than I anticipated. Renata has been going to the Fort Collins Senior and Community Center 3 times a week to volunteer with their literacy program. She's helped put together 2 food drives. Financially, nothing out of the ordinary, all spending is inside the allowance. I scrolled through the pages. Photographs showed Renata at the community center, standing beside other volunteers with an easy smile. No designer labels, jeans, plain sweaters, nothing fancy. The center's coordinator had written a testimonial praising her reliability. Has she made contact with Bryce Holman? Nothing we can confirm. No in-person meetings, no calls on her main number. If they're still in touch, it's through channels that sit outside what we can legally monitor, but there's no hard evidence of contact. I settled back in my chair and felt something surface that had been absent for weeks. Hope? Maybe Donovan had read her right after all. Maybe the loss of him combined with the framework of the will had knocked something loose in her. Maybe it was the jolt she'd needed. Warren. Elliot's tone changed register. I want to say something. Go on. 30 days. 1 month, that's not enough runway to draw conclusions. People are capable of presenting well for a month, particularly when they're aware someone is keeping score. You think it's a performance? I think we don't know yet. Donovan set the window at a full year for a reason. Genuine transformation doesn't happen in a month, and sustained pretense is harder than it looks. I went back to the photographs. Renata reading aloud to children. Renata stacking canned goods. She looked sincere, but she'd looked sincere 5 years ago, when she'd stood at the altar and made her vows. What's your read? We keep watching. We look for consistency over time, and we trust that Donovan understood exactly what he was designing when he wrote this. After the call ended, I sat with the report spread out in front of me for a long while. I wanted to believe it. Lord, I wanted something good to grow out of all this wreckage. I wanted Renata to become the woman Donovan had believed she could be. I wanted my son's faith in people to turn out to be warranted. But then I'd think about room 318. The flowers Bryce had carried to dinner, while Donovan was still at his desk. The months of careful, deliberate deception, 4 weeks of changed behavior couldn't balance that ledger. Not yet. My phone moved on the table. A message from Renata. Dad, I know today weighs on you. 1 month since we lost Donovan. I walked down to Spring Creek Trail this morning, his favorite spot, and sat there for a while thinking about him. I miss him every minute. I hope you're getting through the day all right. I'm trying to make him proud every single day, I really am. I know nothing fills what we lost, but I need you to know that I loved him. I still do. Kay. I read those words several times. The message was softer than anything she'd sent me before, more stripped down, more exposed. I loved him. I still do. Was any of it true? Or had she calculated exactly what a grieving father would need to read on the 1-month mark? Was this the real Renata finally coming forward? Or was this a finely tuned move in the larger game of passing Donovan's test? I didn't have the answer. That uncertainty settled in alongside the grief, both of them taking up space in my chest, both of them making some mornings almost impossible to get through. Elliot had it right. 1 month told you nothing definitive, but those words I loved him. Did she mean them? Had she ever? Or was I looking at the most polished lie she'd told so far? By mid-May, I'd made up my mind. I had to see for myself. The drive from Columbus to Fort Collins was 2 days, just over 1,000 miles, cutting through Indiana, Illinois, Iowa, Nebraska, up into Colorado. I gave Renata no warning, didn't loop in Elliot either. This had nothing to do with official oversight. This was a father who needed to sit across from his daughter-in-law and read what was actually behind her eyes. The house at 412 Horsetooth Drive stood on a calm street with the mountains rising behind it. Donovan had bought it 3 years back when Callaway Dynamics was beginning to generate real money. He'd been so proud of that place. Sent me photos of every room, talked about raising a family there one day. I pulled to the curb just after 3 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon. The grass was cut. The flower beds were tended. Someone was keeping it up. Renata answered on the second knock. Her face opened with surprise. Dad, I had no idea you were. That was the point. I kept my tone even, just wanted to check in on you. Is this a bad time? No, not at all. Please come in. She pulled the door back and stepped aside. It's just a long way to come, unannounced. The house felt different from the pictures Donovan had sent. Smaller somehow, or perhaps absence just shrinks a space. What I wasn't ready for was the walls, every wall covered in photographs. Donovan at his college graduation. Donovan and Renata on their wedding day. Donovan in his office holding the first product prototype from Callaway Dynamics. Donovan and me at a Clippers game, both of us grinning, hot dogs in hand. Every flat surface carried a moment. I couldn't bring myself to take them down. Renata said softly, watching me take it in. People said it might be easier boxing some of them away, but I need to see his face. I just do. I turned toward her. She had on jeans and an Ohio State sweatshirt. Donovan's sweatshirt, the one he'd worn so much. The elbows were threadbare. Coffee, she said. I just put a fresh pot on. We settled at the kitchen table. The window framed the mountains against open Colorado sky. Donovan had been mad about that view. Renata poured 2 mugs and sat across from me. I've been thinking about you, wondering how you're holding up. 1 day at a time, I said. That's about all you can do. The community center has been good for me. She circled the mug with both hands. Gives me somewhere to be. There's a reading program, elementary kids who've fallen behind. One little girl, Sophia, she couldn't read at all when I started working with her back in April. Yesterday she finished her first chapter book. The pride in her voice sounded unforced. I watched her face as she spoke, searching for seams in it, for any sign this was constructed. That matters, I said. It does. It makes me feel like... She paused, turning the thought over. Like what I'm doing is worth something. Like Donovan would think so too. He always believed in showing up for people who needed it. I know. I'm only starting to really understand that now. She lowered her eyes to her coffee. I think I didn't see what was right in front of me when he was alive. The safety, the life he built. I took it for granted. I didn't hold on to what actually counted. Was this genuine? Was I sitting with a woman who'd actually found her way to something real? Or watching a performance she'd been rehearsing for moments? Exactly like this, I started to answer, but her phone buzzed on the counter. Once then, a second time. Her eyes went to the screen and something passed across her face, quick, almost nothing. But I saw it. Unease, or maybe alarm. Sorry, she said, rising quickly. I need to take this. It's probably the coordinator from the center we're putting together a fundraiser next week. She snatched the phone and moved toward the bedroom. Just give me a minute, Dad. The door pulled shut behind her. I sat there in Donovan's kitchen, his photographs on every wall, and listened to the muffled rise and fall of Renata's voice beyond that closed door, asking myself who was actually on the other end of that call. I rang Garrett Nolan the morning after I got back to Columbus. Something's off, I said, skipping any preamble. I need you to look harder. I saw it in her face when that phone lit up. Garrett's voice stayed level professional. What specifically are you thinking, Mr. Calloway? Digital contact. She's too careful to see Bryce face to face anywhere she might be spotted. But when that call came in Fort Collins, her expression shifted. She looked like someone who'd just been caught. I can push further within legal limits, Garrett said. A phone record's public social media financial activity, all of that falls inside the will's oversight clause. But private communications are protected unless we can establish that they're being used to commit fraud or deceive the estate. Donovan funded you through March 2024. Use every tool the law allows you. Understood. Give me a week. That week moved like cold syrup. I kept myself occupied, helped a neighbor patch his fence, drove up to Cincinnati to see my sister, anything to crowd out the image of Renata's face when that phone buzzed. Every night, though, the same question circled back. Garrett phoned on a Tuesday evening. Mr. Calloway, I've found something. I pulled a chair to the kitchen table and opened my laptop for the video call. Garrett's face filled the screen, his office stacked behind him with monitors and filing cabinets. Renata has a second email account, he said, sharing his screen. She left it open, probably assumed no one would look. The account itself appears clean. I can't read the actual messages, only the public metadata. But the connection logs are another matter. He brought up a spreadsheet. IP addresses, timestamps, locations. She's been logging in from her Fort Collins home, as you'd expect. But she's also in regular contact with an IP address that traces back to Denver, specifically an apartment complex in the Rhino district. My chest tightened. Bryce Holman. I can't confirm that without reading the actual messages, which would take a warrant we don't have grounds for. But I cross-referenced. He moved to a different screen. Bryce Holman's LinkedIn profile puts his address in Rhino. The IP from those email exchanges matches the service provider for his building. How often are they in contact? Going by the metadata, which shows connection activity, but not content, roughly 3 to 4 times a week. Evenings generally between 8 and 10 p.m. Evening hours. Renata alone in Donovan's house surrounded by his photographs. There's more, Garrett went on. I've been pulling her phone activity through the service provider reports we're entitled to under the oversight clause. There's an encrypted messaging application active on her device. I can see that it's running and that messages are moving in both directions, but the encryption locks out the content. Which app I'd rather hold off on, naming it for legal reasons, but it's one of the platforms known for end-to-end encryption and automatic message deletion. The kind people reach for when they don't want a record. The weight of it landed on me like something physical. When did she put this on her phone? Garrett scrolled through the data. April 10th. About a week after the first compliance report went out. A week after she'd started showing up at the community center. A week into building her reputation as a devoted grieving widow. Can you identify who she's messaging? Not with certainty. But the patterns, the frequency, the timing, how long the sessions run, mirror the email activity with the Denver IP. It's a reasonable conclusion they're the same person. I looked at the screen, at neat rows of cold data organized into columns. She'd understood from the start that she was being observed. She knew about the conditions, knew her spending was tracked. And rather than actually change, she'd simply become more careful about concealing herself. The encrypted app with self-deleting messages, the second email, the evening hours when nobody would notice. This wasn't a woman grieving her husband and trying to live up to what he'd asked. This was someone working the system, using every tool at her disposal to beat what Donovan had built. And she was running a calculated deception on me, on all of us, and she'd been doing it from nearly the beginning. Garrett called again on May 28th. His voice had a different quality this time, tighter, something pressing behind it. "Mr. Calloway, I need you to sit down." I was already in my chair, but I wrapped a hand around the edge of the table anyway. "What did you find?" Some of the messages became accessible. This particular app includes a cloud backup feature. Most users don't realize that auto-delete doesn't touch those backups if they haven't been manually cleared. Renata hadn't cleared them. "No, sir. And under the legal authority granted by the will's oversight clause, I was able to obtain access through her service provider." He paused. "Mr. Calloway, what I'm about to walk you through, it's not easy. Just say it. I'm sending screenshots now. Messages between Renata and a contact she saved as K. Based on everything in context, I'm certain this is Bryce Holman. My inbox pinged. I opened the attachment with hands that wouldn't stay steady. The first message was from Renata, dated May 15th. "Baby, I just need to get through 11 more months. Then we'll have everything. The company shares alone are worth over $50 million. Bryce's reply. "11 months is a long time. Are you sure you can keep this up, Renata? I've been doing fine so far, haven't I? The old man came by last week." I played the grieving widow perfectly. He almost bought it. The old man, she meant me. My vision wavered, but I kept going. "Bryce, what about the monitoring Renata? It's annoying but manageable. Do the charity work act sad? Wear Donovan's old clothes. It's like playing a role. The people at the Fort Collins Center think I'm some kind of saint. Bryce, I miss you. This is torture. Renata." "I know, baby, but think about what's on the other side. A year of acting for a lifetime of freedom. Once I'm through this ridiculous test, we're set. We can go anywhere." "Bryce, what if they figure it out, Renata? They won't. Warren's too sentimental. He wants to believe I love Donovan. That's what makes this so easy. People only see what they're hoping to find." I stopped. Couldn't go further. My hands were trembling so badly I had to lay the phone flat on the table. She had played me completely. Sat across from me, looked me in the face, wore my son's sweatshirt, talked about making him proud, and every word had been theater, every expression rehearsed. I called Elliot before I'd even stood up from my chair. "We have to shut this down," I said, the moment he answered, "Right now." Garrett got into her messages. "She's still with Bryce. They're planning to take the money. The whole thing has been a lie from the start." "Warren, slow down." What messages I forwarded Garrett's email and waited while he read it. The silence was long. "Elliot, we can end this now, can't we? She's clearly broken the terms. It's not that straightforward." His voice carried something heavy in it. "These are private messages, Warren. Legally, they speak to intent and character, but they don't add up to a documented public violation of the will's conditions." "What do you mean by public violation?" "I mean, listen. Donovan drafted this very deliberately. The conditions are tied to observable behavior, financial misconduct, openly conducted inappropriate relationships, failure to uphold visible standards. Private messages, however, damning occupy a gray area. A capable attorney could argue they are protected speech, that intending something is not the same as doing it. But she is doing it. She's in active contact with Bryce through encrypted private channels. She hasn't met him in person in any way we can document. There's been no public display. For a legal challenge, we need evidence of actual violation, not just intent, however. Clearly it's expressed. I wanted to put something through the wall. So, we just watch her keep running this game. No. We document everything. We stay on her, and we wait for her to make a mistake that's visible not just in a private message. How long will that take? As long as it takes. Donovan built this to hold up, which means we follow the terms even when it's maddening. I looked at the messages again. At my son's widow, referring to me as the old man scheming to walk away with what Donovan had built. "She doesn't deserve any of this mercy," I said. "Probably not," Elliot replied. "But Donovan extended it anyway. We have to trust that he knew what he was doing." Early June and I made a decision to redirect my attention. If I couldn't stop Renata's deception in the short term, I could at least be ready for what came after. Elliot and I sat down on a Monday morning coffee between us. Donovan's estate documents arranged across the table. "Walk me through the scholarship fund," I said. "Donovan designed this as the outcome if Renata failed. I want to understand what he was actually envisioning." Elliot pulled out a folder, Callaway Memorial Scholarship Foundation. It read across the tab. The folder was hefty, nearly as thick as the will itself. "Donovan put almost as much thought into this as he did into the conditions surrounding Renata," Elliot said. "He figured the money would probably end up here, and if it did, he wanted it to mean something." He turned to the first page, the financial structure. $118 million. That number knocked the air out of me. "This covers his stake in Callaway Dynamics, the investment portfolio, the Fort Collins property, and various other holdings," Elliot explained. "Once the foundation is triggered, the conversion is seamless. No probate delays. Operational within weeks." What was the purpose? Full scholarships for students from low-income backgrounds who show exceptional promise in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Kids with ability, but no financial backing. The kind of kid Donovan once was before you put everything on the line for him. That landed square in my chest. Donovan had never let go of where he started. He mapped everything out in detail, Elliot continued. A board of directors, an executive team office space, all specified. He'd even drafted the criteria for selecting recipients. Elliot slid several pages toward me. Donovan had left nothing to chance. Over the 2 weeks that followed, Elliot and I built the team Donovan had pictured. We began with Vivian Callaway, no family connection, despite sharing the name, a 40-year-old nonprofit finance expert with 3 successful charitable foundations all ready to her name. "It would be an honor," she said, when we offered her the CFO position. "Giving young people a genuine shot at transforming their lives, that's work worth showing up for." Brooke Henley came next, 29, with a background spanning nonprofit marketing and communications. Energetic, sharp, with a storyteller's instinct that would serve us well in finding the right students. "My mother raised me on her own," Brooke told me at her interview. "I finished college on scholarships. I know this mission from the inside." Clifford Draper rounded out the trio, 50 years old, 2 decades of nonprofit executive experience behind him. Grounded and methodical, the kind of steadying force that could take Donovan's vision and make it real. We secured temporary space in downtown Columbus, a short walk from Elliot's firm. 3 offices in an older building, decent windows, good light. Vivian built out the financial systems. Brooke drafted the website and application materials. Clifford drew up org charts and timelines. There was something nourishing about constructing something, rather than just watching Renata's deception play out. This was concrete. This was Donovan's true legacy, not the fortune Renata was maneuvering to take, but the futures that fortune could open up. "How long before we can launch?" I asked Vivian one afternoon. "Legally and operationally 2 weeks, she said. "But the activation depends on the trigger. Either Renata breaks the will's conditions, or the year runs out." "Right. So we had a foundation that was fully built, but dormant. Like a rocket on the pad, fueled, programmed, and signal to go. I scanned the room, the 3 people honoring my son's memory. The plans materializing across every desk, the future Donovan had drawn up in his mind. Renata believed she was competing for a financial windfall. She had no sense of what she was truly on the verge of losing, because this had grown into something far beyond money. This was about legacy, about channeling Donovan's success into dozens, then hundreds of young lives. Every student we reached would stand as proof of who my son actually was. Not the man Renata had deceived, but the one who believed people deserved a second chance to choose better. The foundation was primed. Now we waited for Renata to make her move. Garrett called on June 18th, a current of satisfaction running through his voice. "Mr. Callaway, she made a mistake. A serious one." "What happened?" "Renata went into Denver. Cherry Creek walked into the Chanel store around 2 p.m., picked out a limited edition handbag, $26,500, and took it to the register. I waited, my pulse loud in my ears. The transaction was declined. The will's spending controls had worked precisely as Donovan designed them. What did she do? She fell apart, completely. I've got the security footage, video and audio both. She put through 3 separate cards, all refused, then unleashed herself on the sales associate. My email lit up. I opened the footage on my laptop. The image was sharp. Renata stood at the counter in a designer dress, the Chanel bag in front of her, poised until the associate shook her head. I raised the volume. What do you mean declined? That's impossible. Try it again. Same outcome. She offered 2 more cards, both rejected. Her face went crimson. This is ridiculous. Do you know who I am? My husband founded Callaway Dynamics. We're worth millions. The associate held her composure. I'm sorry, ma'am, but perhaps you should call your bank. I don't need to call my bank. The problem is your machine. A manager stepped in calm, diplomatic. Ma'am, large purchases sometimes trigger security holds. This isn't a large purchase. This is a handbag. I should be able to buy a damn handbag without this kind of ordeal. Other shoppers had stopped pretending to browse phones, likely recording. None of you understand. Renata scooped up her cards. This is humiliating. Do you know what it's like having every transaction watched? Every single dollar accounted for? It's a leash. She wasn't speaking to the manager now. She was just venting, too furious to remember where she was. My husband is dead, and his father has the whole estate frozen like I'm under arrest. I can't even treat myself to one thing without getting flagged. It's insane. The manager tried to intervene, but Renata was past stopping. 11 months, she said, and my blood ran cold. 11 more months of this absurd arrangement, and then I'm free. I'll take what belongs to me, and I'll never answer to anyone again. She grabbed her purse and walked out, leaving the bag on the counter. The video cut out. I sat without moving, then called Elliot. You watched it, he asked before I said a word. I watched it. Warren, this may be exactly what we've been waiting for. Public financial misconduct, a clear breach of the spending terms, and most critically, she said 11 months on camera in front of witnesses. She exposed her intent. Is it enough? Elliot paused. I need to go back to the will's exact violation language. But, Warren, this is close. Very close. I stared at the frozen frame, Renata's face, a portrait of rage and entitlement. The woman who'd once sat at my kitchen table in Fort Collins wearing Donovan's Ohio State sweatshirt, the one he'd worn so much, the elbows were threadbare, talking about honoring his name. The woman who'd texted me about walking Spring Creek Trail and aching for my son. All theater. And now she'd unmasked herself in the most damaging way possible on camera, in a public place, surrounded by witnesses, saying aloud everything Elliot and I had suspected from the start. She wasn't carrying Donovan's memory forward. She was enduring it, tallying the days until she could cash out and disappear. Donovan had handed her every opportunity to show she was capable of integrity. She had just answered that question for the world to see. Elliot phoned the morning of June 21st. Warren, Donovan left something for you to be opened exactly 90 days after he passed. 90 days. 3 months since I'd put my boy in the ground. I drove to Elliot's office under a bright Ohio summer sky. Nothing felt quite real. Elliot placed an envelope in my hands. Ivory paper sealed with black wax, my name in Donovan's handwriting, day 90 written beneath it. Take all the time you need, he said quietly, and left me alone. My hands were unsteady as I split the seal. Dad, if you're reading this, 90 days have passed. I'm sorry you've carried this alone. By now, you know the truth about Renata. You've seen what she chose to do. I know that's been painful. There's something I need you to understand. When I found out what she'd been doing, I wasn't angry. I was sad. Those aren't the same thing. Anger wants revenge. Sadness wants redemption. My vision swam, but I kept reading. I thought about confronting her, about screaming, throwing her out. But where would that have led? She would have denied it or turned it back on me, and I'd have died furious, convinced that love was something people only pretended at. I didn't want that to be my final truth. I needed to believe people can rise above their worst choices, that under the right conditions, anyone can reach for integrity instead of selfishness. So I gave her a bridge 1 year to walk across it. I had to stop. Donovan had known he was dying, known his wife had betrayed him, and still chosen grace instead of bitterness. You taught me that, Dad. When I was 16 and I stole money for concert tickets, you didn't yell. You asked, who do you want to be, Donovan? Someone who cuts corners or someone who earns what he wants? That question redirected everything. It put character at the center of how I thought about myself. I'm asking Renata that same question now. This will is how I'm waiting for her answer. The paragraph that followed was underlined. But Dad, if she fails, if the money outweighs the honor, then I need you to promise me something. Take what I built and multiply it. Give it to kids who deserve a real chance, who carry talent inside them, but have nothing behind them. who dream past the edges of what their circumstances allow. What I'm about to share changed the way I understood everything my son had done, not just for me, but for the world he was quietly leaving behind. Before you hear it, I want to ask you something. If the person you loved most had spent their final months building something extraordinary in secret, would you have had the strength to carry it forward, or would the grief have been too much? You always told me genius without compassion is worthless. You said it the day I landed my first patent when Callaway Dynamics began turning a real profit every time my ego started getting ahead of me. A mind without a heart, you used to say, is just a fancier kind of destitution. So if Renata can't make it across that bridge, take what I've left behind and build new ones for people who need them. One scholarship at a time, one student at a time. That's what I want to leave behind, Dad. Not my name on a building, not money dropped in the lap of someone who never worked for it. Doors opening for kids the way they once opened for me. You staked everything on me when there was no good reason to. I love you, Dad. Being your son is something I'll carry with pride. I know you'll see this through. Yours always, Donovan. Then at the very bottom, a postscript: genius without compassion is worthless. But compassion that never moves is just a feeling. Don't stop at feeling sorry for those kids, Dad. Go do something about it. I couldn't move. Tears were running down my face, not the hot, furious kind that had come when I'd read Renata's messages to Bryce. These were different, quieter, something between pride and grief, and a kind of fierce resolve. Elliot stepped back in, read me in a single glance. He wants the foundation. I managed my voice scraped raw. If Renata doesn't hold up her end, everything funds scholarships, young people who actually need the opening. I know, he said. The legal architecture handles all of it. I studied him, this decent man who'd sat beside my son while Donovan mapped out every contingency. I give you my word, I said. I give Donovan my word, not $1, not one student, not one life touched by this will go to waste. We honor what he stood for. Elliot gave a slow nod. Then we'd better be ready when the moment comes. I pressed the letter flat against my chest and held it there. Donovan was no longer in this world, but something of him remained in those words, steering me, reminding me where the compass needle had to point. I wasn't going to fail him. Garrett rang on July 16th, the morning after it happened. Mr. Callaway, he caught himself the name slipping out wrong. He'd finally made the call I'd been bracing for over 4 months. From the day Donovan died in March, I'd watched Renata perform her grief with real discipline, but patience has a bottom. Tell me what you have. July 15th, yesterday afternoon. Renata drove out to Loveland 30 miles or so south of Denver, small place off the radar. Figured she wouldn't run into anyone who knew her. My knuckles went white around the phone. She met Bryce Holman, a place called the Foundry Patio, seating midday crowd completely out in the open. The photos are sharp, Mr. Callaway. He pushed them through while we were still talking. I pulled them up. Renata and Bryce across from each other at an outdoor table, the mountains stacked up behind them, her arm extended so her hand could reach his thumb moving in slow circles on her wrist. The look on their faces wasn't the cautious warmth of old acquaintances. It was the unguarded ease of two people deep in something. Second shot, both on their feet in the parking lot, his hand resting low on her back, her chin lifted toward him. Third shot, Bryce Holman kissing my son's widow in plain sight, middle of the day, nothing hidden about it. Timestamp 2:47 p.m. July 15th, 2023. People saw it, Garrett said. The server diners at nearby tables, foot traffic going past. She wasn't operating in the shadows here. No coded messages, no tucked-away location. Completely exposed, Mr. Callaway. That's the standard the violation clause sets, and she met it. I went back to the photos. Renata laughing, relaxed her body, leaning toward his. No trace of mourning, no flicker of guilt. Get everything over to Elliot, I said. The whole package, photo statements, all of it. Sent the moment I hung up with him. Elliot was already ahead of it. Warren, his voice was sent. This is the one, the public violation we've been building toward. Break it down for me. The will requires that Renata avoid openly conducted inappropriate relationships across the full 12-month window. We already had the communication trail with Bryce, the evidence of deliberate deception. But what Donovan wrote into that document demanded behavior that could be witnessed. She handed us exactly that. A public venue, physical contact in front of strangers, a kiss in an open parking lot, Documented photographs, timestamps, GPS witness accounts. Every element the will demands is sitting in that file. I went back to the photos one more time. 4 months of Renata posting tributes to Donovan, doing volunteer hours at the Columbus Post, sending me texts about how deeply she missed him. 4 months of theater. The curtain had finally come down. What's the sequence from here? We issue a formal notice of violation, spell out the clause she broke, attach the documentation, and notify her that her standing under the will was extinguished as of July 15th. Every asset moves at once to the Callaway Memorial Scholarship Foundation. Timeline. Draft will be finished by tomorrow, goes out certified mail and email simultaneously. She retains the right to push back, but Warren, this evidence doesn't leave room for a counter-argument. I sat with Donovan's letter in my mind, 3 weeks old, still fresh. His hope that Renata would rise to it. The bridge he'd constructed for her with his own hands. She'd gotten partway across, stopped, and stepped off the edge. Move forward, I said. Write the notice. Name every violation. Cut her off. Once this is set in motion, are you certain? Completely. No shake in my voice, none at all. Donovan gave her a full year. She burned through 4 months. Honestly, she lasted longer than I'd have given her credit for. Elliot went quiet. Everything will be on your desk first thing tomorrow. After we said goodbye, I sat in the stillness, looking at those photos glowing on my screen. Outside, the Ohio sky was draining into shades of orange and purple as the sun went down. Renata had thought she'd covered herself. Thought 30 miles to Loveland put enough distance between her and Fort Collins. Thought 4 months was a sufficient runway to get sloppy. Every one of those calculations had been wrong. And now at last, what Donovan had dreamed into existence was about to become real. July 25th brought me to Elliot's office for the final review. Vivian Calloway and Clifford Draper had made the trip in as well. This had long since outgrown the category of a family quarrel. We were here to switch on a machine that would reshape lives for years to come. Elliot laid the full set of documents across the conference table. In order, the will, the violation file, all supporting evidence, the foundation charter. Walk with me through the framework, he said. Donovan engaged 3 separate attorneys to comb through every line. Their signatures are on the back pages. He found them with his finger. Any challenge in court dies right there. I took that in. Those names on those pages meant something. The notice identifies 3 distinct violations. Elliot continued. First, on June 18th, Renata attempted to spend $26,500 on a luxury handbag, an act of financial recklessness that directly contravenes the will's conditions. Vivian was logging the details on her laptop, building the foundation's paper trail. Second, an ongoing pattern of covert contact with Bryce Holman through encrypted channels, a deliberate effort to mislead the oversight structure. And third, Clifford read out from the document in front of him, a public display of an inappropriate relationship on July 15, 2023 at Loveland, Colorado, observed by multiple witnesses and captured in photographic evidence. Elliot turned to face me directly. Warren, the law requires us to allow 15 days for a response once the notice is delivered. She has the right to explain or challenge. No photograph has ever explained itself away, I said, keeping my voice low. Correct. When those 15 days close and whatever she submits won't be enough, we execute the transfer. The foundation receives everything immediately. Vivian straightened in her chair. We're prepared. The accounts are open, the board is seated, the application portal is live. The instant authorization lands, we start reviewing candidates. That's first year, how many do we reach? 64 full scholarships, Clifford said. 4 years each, tuition, housing, books, everything covered. We're already sitting on more than 200 preliminary applications. 64 students, 64 complete trajectories altered, because Donovan had held on to belief in people while quietly making sure the backup plan was ironclad. Notice goes out tomorrow, Elliot said. July 28th, certified mail to Fort Collins, email to every address we have on file for Renata. Her window closes August 12th. He moved the draft across the table toward me. One final read. I took my time with it. Every word was measured, stripped of anything personal. Dear Mrs. Voss, this letter constitutes formal notice of violation and termination of rights under the Levin Calloway deceased. On the basis of documented evidence and independent verification, you have materially breached the conditions set forth herein. Each violation followed in order: dates, locations, references to supporting documentation. Cold, exact. Precisely what Donovan would have wanted. Evidence over emotion every time. The closing paragraph. You have 15 calendar days from receipt of this notice to submit written explanation or to contest these findings. Failure to respond adequately will result in the immediate termination of all rights and the transfer of assets as designated in the will. I put my name at the bottom. Send it. Elliot collected the papers in a single clean stack. It goes out within the hour. I got to my feet and went around the table handshake with Elliot, with Vivienne, with Clifford. The people Donovan's work would pass through on its way into the world. Solid people. The people he'd have wanted. That night, I stayed in the kitchen with my phone face up on the table. Elliot's email landed at 6:47 p.m. Warren formal notice of violation, dispatched via certified mail tracking number attached. Email delivery confirmed to all addresses on file. Response window opens July 29th, closes August 12th. Standing by. Elliot. I clicked the tracking link. Somewhere out in the postal network, a letter was already in motion, headed for Fort Collins. The thing was done. No pulling it back now. Renata would get the notice tomorrow. She'd tear open that envelope, read those 3 violations spelled out in plain terms, and understand that her act was finished. 4 months. 12 were on offer, and she'd made it through 4. Donovan had laid a bridge right at her feet. She'd chosen not to walk it. Now the consequences were coming. The letter was already in the mail. The days were counting down. 15 of them, and then this would be settled one way or another. Renata turned up at Elliot's office on August 5th, 8 days after the notice reached her. I was already there for a scheduled appointment when his assistant's voice came through the intercom. Mr. Farrow, Mrs. Voss, is in the lobby. She says it can't wait. Elliot looked across at me. I gave him a nod. Send her in. She came through the door like something that had been coiled too tight for too long. Eyes raw and red mascara tracking down both cheeks. The composed woman I'd sat across from at the coffee shop back in March was nowhere in this room. What stood before us was someone who'd been backed into a corner. She pointed at me, hand unsteady, voice climbing. Dad, how could you let this happen? I kept my seat hands resting flat on the table. Let what happen, Renata? This. She slapped the violation notice down on the conference table. Hiring people to follow me everywhere, photograph me without my knowledge. This is a violation of my privacy. Elliot rose to his feet unhurried. Mrs. Voss, every piece of monitoring in this process was conducted within the law, under authority your husband's will explicitly granted. When you accepted the monthly allowance of $2,400, you signed an acknowledgement of those oversight provisions. I never agreed to be surveilled. You agreed to full transparency, Elliot said. The will makes clear that all conduct during the 12-month period was subject to verification. She swung back toward me, tears spilling now. Dad, please! This is wrong. You're twisting this into something it isn't. I opened the folder in front of me and drew out the Loveland photographs, set them down on the table, one after the other. The patio table, the parking lot, the kiss. Tell me what I'm looking at, I said, keeping my voice level. The color left her face. She stared at those photos like she was willing them to dissolve. That isn't what it looks like. It looks exactly like Bryce Holman kissing you in a public parking lot on the afternoon of July 15th. He's a friend, an old one. We were just catching up. Old friends don't kiss like that, Renata. It was a goodbye. I was ending things because of the terms of the will. That kiss was the closing of a door. Elliot slid a document across the table toward her. These are excerpts from encrypted messages between you and Mr. Holman, obtained through your service provider by legal process. In those messages, you discuss 11 more months and getting what's yours. Care to address that? She snatched the document, eyes moving across it, fingers trembling. You had no right to those. Every right, I said. Donovan gave us that right. He knew Renata. He knew about Bryce before he was gone. He knew what was happening while he was trying to build something lasting for the two of you. That's not true. It is. Donovan hired Garrett Nolan back in January. He saw everything. The hotels, the dinners, the deception. And rather than cut you off, he gave you the chance to be different a full year to prove it. She folded forward in her chair, face in her hands. When she lifted her head, something had shifted in her expression. The desperation had reorganized itself into something colder. Fine. I had feelings for Bryce, yes, but I ended it. Loveland was about closing that chapter for good. Since Donovan passed, I've held to every term of that. Well, the charity hours, the spending limits, every bit of it. Except you haven't ended it, Elliot said. Our monitoring shows continued digital contact as recently as August 2nd. 3 days ago, she opened her mouth. Nothing came out. You still have 8 days, Elliot went on. August 12th is your deadline to respond. If you bring us credible evidence that actually contradicts these findings, not explanations, not context, evidence will look at it. But, Mrs. Voss, I won't mislead you. What's stacked against you is substantial. She pushed back from the table and grabbed her bag. This isn't finished. I'm getting an attorney. I'll contest every word of this. That's entirely your right. She fixed her gaze on me as she moved toward the door. Donovan would be ashamed of you for turning his death into a weapon against me. I held her eyes. Donovan is ashamed of you, Renata. That's the reason he drafted the will the way he did. She walked out without another word. The door closed. I sat in the quiet that followed. Elliot poured water into 2 glasses and nudged one across to me. 8 days, he said. She won't survive them, I said. Those photos can't be explained. Those messages can't be explained. No, Elliot agreed, they can't. Garrett kept me in the loop all week. From August 6th through the 12th, Renata ran a frantic campaign to salvage whatever she could manage. She's been moving fast, Garrett reported on Wednesday morning. Spent 3 hours at the Fort Collins Senior and Community Center yesterday, went through the volunteers, individually asked each one to write a letter on her behalf. I could picture it. Making the rounds, probably weeping, playing the grieving widow, being hounded by a cruel father-in-law. She's also reconnected with Bryce Holman. Garrett continued. They met at a coffee shop in Denver on Tuesday. Surveillance shows it was emotional on her side. She appeared to be asking him for something. He wasn't comfortable with it. I can see where this is going. She wants him to write a letter calling them just friends. That's exactly it. And he did. Dated August 8th claims they're longtime friends who were reconnecting, that Loveland was closure. The kiss was a momentary lapse, nothing romantic about it. I nearly laughed. Nearly. She genuinely believes that'll hold up. She's also hired a lawyer, Nadine Crowley, based in Fort Collins. Estate disputes are her specialty. That got my attention. What's Crowley's read on this? From what our sources say, she reviewed the will and told Renata she has virtually no realistic path to a legal win. It was constructed too precisely. 3 independent attorneys put their names to it. Crowley apparently advised that Renata's strongest move is to cooperate and appeal for leniency. She won't find any. Crowley likely knows that Garrett said, but she's still collecting her fee. By Friday, August 9th, Garrett confirmed that Renata had her defense package together. 8 letters from Fort Collins Senior and Community Center volunteers speaking to her dedication and character, Bryce's statement denying any romantic involvement, and a 3-page personal letter from Renata herself, arguing she'd been unfairly targeted. On August 12th, the deadline day, Elliot called. The package arrived an hour ago, certified mail. Come take a look. I was at his office in 20 minutes. Everything was laid out across the conference table. The volunteer letters were almost interchangeable in structure. Renata had clearly scripted them. Each one praised her contributions to the literacy program, her patience with students who struggled, her warmth and generosity of spirit. These confirm she showed up and did the volunteer work, Elliot said. But they don't speak to the violations. They don't account for Loveland or the encrypted messages. Bryce's letter was the more interesting piece. Typed on a plain sheet, no letterhead, dated August 8th. To whom it may concern. My name is Bryce Holman. I have known Renata Voss for several years as a friend. Following the passing of her husband, I reached out to offer my support during an extremely difficult period. Our meeting in Loveland on July 15th was 2 old friends spending time together. Any physical contact was misread. It was a farewell embrace as I was about to relocate for work. There is no romantic relationship between us. Sincerely, Bryce Holman. He's lying, I said. No question about it. And here's what makes his letter useful to us. Notice what he leaves out. He says nothing about the hotels in 2022. Makes no attempt to deny the affair that was ongoing while Donovan was still alive. He's only trying to reframe a single afternoon in a parking lot. I lifted Renata's 3-page letter. It was a finely constructed exercise in misdirection. The surveillance was traumatizing and invasive. The Loveland photographs were stripped of their context. Bryce had been helping her work through her grief. The encrypted messages reflected private thoughts during a period of acute vulnerability. She had honored Donovan's memory faithfully throughout. The incident with the $26,500 handbag was a momentary failure of judgment she genuinely regretted. Not once did she deny the affair outright. Not once did she tell the truth. Elliot closed the folder. This doesn't meet the standard. She has not produced credible evidence that contradicts our findings. Every page deflects, reframes, or excuses, none of it refutes. So, where does that leave us? I draft the final termination notice. It goes out tomorrow, August 13th. From that moment, every right she holds under the will is extinguished. All assets transfer immediately to the Callaway Memorial Scholarship Foundation. I looked at the carefully arranged pile of fabrications on that table. Letters from decent people who had no idea who they were writing on behalf of. A statement from the man who had helped Renata betray my son. 3 pages of explanations that explain nothing at all. "Send it," I said. Elliot nodded. "I'll have it ready by morning." Donovan's true legacy would begin. On August 14th, 2 days after the deadline, we held a formal board meeting at Elliot's office. This wasn't the two of us working through paperwork anymore. This was the official governing review of the Callaway Memorial Scholarship Foundation. Vivienne Callaway. Clifford Draper and Brooke Henley were seated around the conference table alongside us. Elliot had laid out copies of Renata's full submission package in front of each board member. "Let's go through this in sequence," Elliot said. Mrs. Voss submitted her response on August 12th. The package has 3 components: letters from community volunteers, a statement from Bryce Holman, and a personal explanation from Mrs. Voss herself. Vivienne picked up the volunteer letters first. These confirm she took part in the literacy program, but none of it addresses the violations. "Agreed," Clifford said. "Character references aren't evidence that refutes the claims." Brooke picked up Bryce Holman's statement. "He says the July 15th meeting was a farewell embrace because he was relocating for work. He frames it as 2 old friends parting, nothing romantic about it." "Oh, that's the version he wants us to accept," Elliot said. "But here's where it unravels." He drew out another document. "This is the metadata analysis Garrett Nolan completed yesterday. It tracks digital communication between Renata's devices and Bryce's." He pointed to specific entries. Contact didn't stop after July 15th. There was messaging activity on July 18th, July 21st, and July 25th. I leaned forward. July 25th, 10 days after the supposed farewell. "Exactly," Elliot said. "If Loveland was genuinely a final goodbye, what explains contact? 10 days later, Bryce's letter uses the past tense about relocating, but the communication record tells a different story." Vivienne made notes. "That directly contradicts both his statement and Renata's claim that she'd ended things." "There's more," Elliot continued. "The July 25th exchange ran for approximately 47 minutes. That's not a quick check-in. That's a real conversation with substance to it." Brooke shook her head. "So she meets him publicly on July 15th, gets caught on camera, and retreats to encrypted channels. She didn't end it, she just got more careful after being seen." I went back to Renata's 3-page letter. All those measured sentences about being misunderstood and honoring Donovan's memory. Every line built to obscure a simple truth. She had never stopped. Not after Donovan died, not once the will's terms were spelled out for her. Not even after the monitoring reports landed. She'd only changed where she hid it. "What about the handbag?" Clifford asked. "She calls it a momentary lapse," Elliot said. "But the real question is whether it points to a pattern consistently placing personal desires above the spending limits the will required." "And it does," Vivienne said flatly. Elliot looked around the table. "The board's job is to weigh the full picture, the Loveland photographs, the metadata, confirming ongoing contact, the attempted $26,500 purchase, and the deficiencies in Mrs. Voss's explanations. Do we accept her response or reject it?" Nobody wavered. "Reject," Vivienne said. "Reject," Clifford agreed. "Reject," Brooke added. Elliot turned to me. "Warren as executor, the person Donovan trusted to carry this through. What's your determination?" I thought about Donovan's letters, about his hope that Renata might still choose the honest path, about the bridge he'd built for her with such care. She'd had 4 full months to show she could live with integrity, to honor what he'd meant to her. Instead, she'd spent that time working out how to beat the system. She'd rounded up volunteers who had no idea who they were vouching for. She'd persuaded Bryce to put his name to a lie. She'd produced 3 pages of evasion without a breath of real remorse. "I reject her explanation," I said. "She has not provided credible evidence contradicting the violations. Her response is insufficient, and in key respects, it is demonstrably false." Elliot recorded the official notation. "The board's determination is unanimous. Mrs. Voss's response is rejected. We proceed with the termination of her rights under Donovan Calloway's will, effective immediately." He closed the file. "As of this moment, all assets transferred to the Calloway Memorial Scholarship Foundation." Donovan's real legacy had begun. On the morning of August 20th, 2023, I sat across from Elliot Farrow in his downtown Columbus office as he set the final termination notice on the desk between us. 12 pages each paragraph, packed with citations and clause references. 6 days had elapsed since the board meeting. 6 days Elliot had devoted to language that left no opening for dispute. "This is it, Warren," he said quietly. "Once this goes out, there's no pulling it back." I nodded. My hands were calmer now than they had been in months. "Send it." Elliot walked me through the notice one last time. It opened with a formal declaration. "Pursuant to the last will and testament of Donovan James Calloway executed February 15th, 2023, and filed with the Probate Court of Franklin County, Ohio. This letter serves as official notification of termination of all inheritance rights granted to Renata Marie Voss, effective September 1st, 2023. Then the violations. Violation 1, excessive and frivolous expenditure. On June 18th, 2023, Renata attempted to purchase a limited edition handbag valued at $26,500 at a luxury boutique in Denver, Colorado. The transaction was declined under the spending oversight protocols established by the will. Security footage captured her 11 months, then I'm done. That remark, alongside the attempted purchase, demonstrated clear intent to sidestep the will's requirement of financial restraint and respect for Donovan's values. Violation 2, continuation of an inappropriate relationship. Metadata analysis conducted by licensed investigator Garrett Nolan established that Renata maintained ongoing digital communication with Bryce Holman throughout the compliance period. Encrypted messaging records showed contact as recently as July the 25th, 2023, 10 days after she claimed the relationship had ended. Messages dated May 29th, 2023, included the phrase 11 more months, confirming her intent to wait out the period rather than honor Donovan's memory. Violation 3, public display of romantic involvement. On July 15th, 2023, Renita was photographed in an intimate embrace with Bryce Holman at a public restaurant in Loveland, Colorado. Witnesses and time-stamped images to 47 p.m. documented the encounter. This constituted a direct breach of the will's clause prohibiting inappropriate relationships conducted openly. Elliot had left nothing out: dates, locations, witness statements, metadata logs. Renata's response package submitted August 12th had been reviewed and unanimously rejected by the Foundation's board on August 14th. Her explanations were found insufficient and in critical areas demonstrably false. The notice ended with the transfer clause. All assets, properties, and financial holdings originally designated for Renata Marie Voss under the will are hereby transferred in full to the Calloway Memorial Scholarship Foundation, a 501c3 charitable organization established to provide full-ride scholarships to economically disadvantaged students pursuing degrees in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. This transfer is irrevocable and takes effect September 1st, 2023. At 10:17 a.m., Elliot hit send. The notice went out via certified email with read receipts and via USPS priority mail with signature confirmation. Within 90 seconds, the email showed as opened. 3 minutes later, my phone rang. Renata's name on the screen. I let it ring through to voicemail. It rang again, then again. Over the next 2 hours, she called 14 times. I got through the messages that evening. The first few were frantic, desperate. "Warren, please, this is a mistake. We can work this out. I love Donovan. I still do. Please call me back." Then the register changed entirely. "You have no right to do this. I was his wife. I'm entitled to that money. You twisted his mind when he was at his lowest. I'll take this to court. I'll drag this out for years. You will regret this. The last message was stripped cold. You think you've won. You haven't. I know people. I know lawyers. This isn't over. I sat in the stillness of my rental apartment phone, in hand, thinking about Donovan's letter from June 21st, the one where he'd written compassion without action is just sentiment. He'd offered her a bridge. She'd decided to burn it. I deleted the voicemails one by one until the inbox read empty. Then I set the phone down and looked out at the lights of Columbus, where tomorrow the Callaway Memorial Scholarship Foundation would begin doing what Donovan had always meant it to do. His true legacy had finally taken root. The day after the termination notice went out, Renata Voss retained a lawyer. His name was Rowan Ashby, a Denver attorney who'd built his reputation on aggressive estate challenges. On August 21st, 2023, Elliot received a 5-page letter contesting the validity of Donovan's will, citing undue influence, invasion of privacy, and emotional distress. Ashby's case was thin. He argued the surveillance had been unlawful and the will's conditions unconscionable, but his language ran far ahead of his substance. Elliot set it aside without much deliberation. He's reaching Warren. There's nothing here that holds up legally. It goes nowhere. Now, how long does this last? I asked. 2, maybe 3 weeks. She's cornered. Expect more noise before September 1st. He was right. On August 23rd, Renata published a lengthy statement across her social media accounts, accusing my family of theft and cruelty. Vivian Callaway sent me a screenshot that evening. Over 1,000 words shaped as a grieving widow's appeal for justice. She claimed the Callaway family had seized her inheritance through unlawful surveillance and deliberate manipulation. She called me controlling and vindictive. She accused Elliot of working against her from the start. She wrote that Donovan's father and sister would be horrified by our conduct. The post carried photographs Donovan smiling at their wedding, the two of them out on a trail near Fort Collins, the house at 412 Horsetooth Drive. She wrote, "I loved my husband with all my heart. His family has weaponized his memory to punish me for trying to rebuild my life after losing him. They brought in private investigators to intrude on my privacy and recast ordinary moments as something dark. They are tearing down everything Donovan worked to build." Within hours, the post had spread across hundreds of accounts. Strangers responded, some with sympathy, many with doubt. Several people spotted the contradictions and aired them in the comments for everyone to see. She pulled the post down by morning. Elliot's advice was simple. Walk away, don't feed it. Let her do the damage herself. Renata, though, wasn't ready to let it go. August 26th. She turned up at my rental place in Columbus. I had the coffee going when the banging hit the door. Not a knock, hammering, desperate, insistent nonstop. When I pulled it open, she was right there in the hallway. Eyes raw and puffed mascara dragged halfway down her cheeks. Hair half escaped from a ponytail that had long since given up. She had the hollow look of someone who hadn't seen a bed in 2 or 3 days. "Warren, please." The sob broke her voice apart. "I'm begging you, please. I know I did things wrong, but you cannot take this from me. That money is the only thing I have. Donovan wanted to make sure I was looked after. Please." My hand stayed where it was on the door. "He gave you a chance. You made your choice." "I loved him." She got out, tears running down her face. "I love him still. Those reports don't tell the whole story. They're twisted, pulled out of context. Warren, just hear me out. One more chance. That's all I'm asking. We have nothing left to discuss." She shouldered into the gap, blocking me from closing it. "You have no idea what I was going through. He was slipping away, and I was completely on my own. Lean on. I can prove it. Please don't do this to me." "Move back, Renata." "No, you don't get to just discard me." 10 more minutes she stood there crying, bargaining her voice, climbing from pleas into something raw and ragged. She promised things she couldn't possibly deliver. She swore she was a new woman. The moment I finally got the door shut, her fists hit at both hands full force, and she screamed my name down the corridor. Someone in a nearby unit rang the building manager. 20 minutes after that, a pair of Columbus officers showed up, walked her out, and handed her a formal warning. Come back and harassment charges follow. Then, August 31st arrived 1 day shy of when the termination became official, and a final email dropped into my inbox. Subject, "I'm sorry. Warren, I'm aware of how much pain I've caused you and how badly I've dishonored Donovan's memory. I am truly sorry. If anything I can do would set this right, name it. I will do whatever it takes. Renata. No reply, no second thought. Gone. At midnight on September 1st, 2023, Renata Marie Voss's claims under Donovan's will were formally extinguished. The Callaway Memorial Scholarship Foundation took its place as the sole beneficiary of his entire estate. That same morning, September 1st, 2023, 5 months to the day since Donovan died, I sat across from Elliot Farrow and watched my son's life's work take its permanent shape. A deep, almost sacred quiet filled the room. Vivian Callaway was to my left, a glowing spreadsheet open on her screen. Clifford Draper sat with his hands laced together on the table, leaning slightly in. Brooke Henley held her position near the window, a folder pressed against her side. Elliot occupied the head of the table, the signed documents stacked neatly before him. "Here we are," he said, his voice low. "The transfer cleared at midnight. Everything Donovan created, it belongs to the foundation now." He drew back the cover of the top folder and read from the official record. The sum of $118 million, comprising the entirety of Donovan James Callaway's estate, has been transferred to the Callaway Memorial Scholarship Foundation, a registered 501c3 charitable organization. Assets include equity holdings in Callaway Dynamics, valued at $72 million, bank accounts, and liquid assets totaling $29 million. Real estate properties including the residence at 412 Horsetooth Drive, Fort Collins, Colorado, valued at $8 million, and so forth. Investment portfolios and securities valued at $9 million. The property in Fort Collins will be listed for sale with proceeds directed to the foundation's endowment. Renata Marie Voss retains no legal claim to any portion of this estate. Elliot lifted his eyes from the page. "It's finished, Warren. Every single dollar is now in service of Donovan's mission." Something I'd been bracing against for months finally let go somewhere deep in my chest. Relief and grief and pride all arrived at the same instant. Vivian rotated the laptop so I could see. Let me put some numbers behind what this actually means. She'd built a detailed, color-coded financial projection. Running $118 million as our endowment, we can push out annual scholarship funding of roughly $4,700,000 that's on a conservative 4% return assumption. 64 full-ride scholarships in year one. 64, I said almost to myself. Every scholarship covers tuition, housing, books, and living expenses across 4 years, Vivian went on. We're pricing it at $50,000 per student annually, $200,000 by the time they walk across that stage. This isn't a grant. It's a complete pipeline into a STEM career. Clifford shifted forward in his seat. We're already past 200 applications, Warren. From every corner of the country, kids out of low-income households, first-generation students, young people with the kind of minds that deserve a real shot, but have never been handed one. The committee hasn't stopped working. 200 already, I said. When the offer is this real, Brooke said, a quiet smile crossing her face. People don't wait long to spread the word. She set a tablet flat on the table in front of me. Take a look at what we built. I dropped my eyes to the screen. The site was clean sharp, and at the top, Donovan's face. I knew the photograph, a Callaway Dynamics event from a couple of years back. He was mid-thought at the lectern intensity written across every feature. Under the image, white letters on deep blue held one line, "Genius without compassion is worthless." Donovan James Callaway. Beneath that, the mission, the Callaway Memorial Scholarship Foundation, honors the legacy of Donovan James Callaway by providing full-ride scholarships to economically disadvantaged students pursuing degrees in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. We believe that brilliance exists in every community, and that access to education should never be determined by wealth. I sat with it, Donovan's words, Donovan's face. This thing we had raised in his honor, somewhere in me, for the first time in months, something eased. He'd be proud, I murmured. Elliot gave a slow nod. He knew exactly where this was headed. He trusted you to get it there. Vivian closed the screen. Clifford rose and pressed my hand. Brooke gathered the tablet back into her folder. Donovan was still standing. I walked out of Elliot's office into an afternoon that tasted like the tail end of summer, and I let myself think about those 64 students, the envelopes that would find their mailboxes in the weeks ahead, and what would happen inside them when they did. Donovan's real work hadn't ended. It had just drawn its first breath. From September through December 2023, the Callaway Memorial Scholarship Foundation consumed me entirely. 4 months, I'll never forget, the fullest and most purposeful stretch of my life. September was all about choosing those first 64. The applications kept arriving, each one carrying its own weight of sacrifice and ambition. Clifford Draper ran the selection committee, and they pushed through essays, transcripts, and recommendation letters well past midnight, night after night. The benchmark was straightforward: find students who lived the values Donovan held, rigor, need, and a determination to turn their education outward toward others. Those 64 came from all over the map: New York, Los Angeles, tiny towns in Montana and Mississippi, families who came from other countries and landed in Arizona, young men and women raised on Iowa farms. A number were growing up with mothers who worked 2 jobs just to hold things together. Some had aged out of the foster system. A handful had escaped places shattered by war. What every last one of them carried academic records that stood apart, and a hunger to do something with their lives in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. October brought our inaugural ceremony in Columbus, a downtown banquet hall, dressed simply, nothing overdone, but the room held something. All 64 recipients came. Families made cross-country trips. For some of these kids, this was their first time on a plane. I watched them come through the door, the nerves, the brightness, the barely contained amazement, and Donovan was right there with me in that moment. I knew without question he would have loved every second of it. My turn at the podium came, and I looked out at those 64 faces. This scholarship is yours, not just because of what you've already achieved, I told them, my voice holding steady, but because you carry forward something my son, Donovan Callaway, believed with everything he had: that genius without compassion is worthless. You've shown us the talent. Now carry something else with you. Work hard, go after what you're meant to do, but never walk past the people around you who need a hand. The world will always want brilliant engineers and scientists. What it truly needs are ones who give a damn. No sound, then a single pair of hands, then another. The whole room rose. When it was over, they came to find me, students, parents, families. Tears were everywhere, including mine. A mother from Mississippi held both my hands and said, "You've handed my daughter a future we never could have built on our own. Thank you. Thank you." I could only tell her what I believed Donovan would be proud of her daughter. In November, Brooke Henley took the foundation's website live. Officially, she'd spent weeks getting every element right. Donovan's photograph anchored the top of the page, and beneath it, his words, "Genius without compassion is worthless." Under that sat 4 distinct sections. The first was Donovan's story, a chronicle of how a boy raised in a working-class Ohio household had gone on to build Callaway Dynamics, driven always by a belief in education and in looking out for others. The second was our mission, the foundation's core values and what we were there to do: hand full-ride scholarships to STEM students who couldn't otherwise afford the path. Third came our scholars, 64 of them, each entry carrying a hometown, a field of study, a personal statement written in their own voice. Last was how to apply, laid out for anyone hoping to be part of the next cycle, which would open in January 2024. The site pulled in more than 50,000 visitors in that opening week alone. Money started arriving from people we'd never met, strangers who'd read Donovan's story and felt something pull at them. Before November was out, those gifts had added $15,000 to what we'd already set aside. Then came December. A few days before Christmas, an email landed in my inbox, and I couldn't move past the first line. It was from Isabel Reyes, 18 years old, a girl from a small town not far outside Albuquerque, New Mexico. She was at the University of New Mexico, working toward a degree in mechanical engineering. "Mr. Callaway, I don't know how to thank you. This scholarship has changed my life and my family's life. My mom cried for an hour when I told her I could go to college without debt. I promise I will work as hard as I can and make you and Donovan proud. Thank you for believing in me. Isabel Reyes." I didn't move from my desk for a long time. I just read her words over and over. Then I wrote back, "Isabel, Donovan would be very proud of you. Keep going. We're all rooting for you. Warren Callaway." I clicked send. Then I sat there quietly, and for the first time since my son had left this world, something that felt like peace settled in my chest. All the while, as the Callaway Memorial Scholarship Foundation took root and spread, Renata Voss was not finished. Through the fall, September, October, November 2023, she kept pushing her legal challenge against Donovan's will. Rowan Ashby put the suit on record in September, filing formally with Larimer County District Court. It was a dense, hostile document. The will trampled on marital property rights. The surveillance clause amounted to an invasion of Renata's privacy. Donovan had been manipulated by his father and his attorneys at the most vulnerable moment of his life. Ashby wanted the whole thing thrown out. He wanted Renata's estate placed at roughly $59 million. Elliot rang me that same day. "Warren, none of this is a surprise. Ashby's casting a wide net and hoping something catches. It won't." "What's our timeline?" I asked. "A few months," he said. There'd be a preliminary hearing in October. The judge would hear both sides, and Elliot was certain we'd come out ahead. His advice: stay fixed on the foundation and let him worry about the rest. He built our defense with real thoroughness. Everything we had went in the documented arc of Renata's betrayal. Garrett Nolan's surveillance findings, the digital metadata that showed she'd never actually stopped seeing Bryce Holman, despite claiming otherwise, the pictures from Loveland, what happened at the boutique, the encrypted back and forth between them. On top of that, he assembled everything needed to validate the will itself. Sworn statements from the 3 attorneys who'd been present for Donovan's signing, medical records establishing his full mental competence when he drew up the document in February 2023, and the personal letters Donovan had written, spelling out exactly why he'd made the choices he had. October 18th, 2023, brought the preliminary hearing at Larimer County District Court. I went with Elliot. Vivian Callaway was there too, in her capacity representing the foundation. It was a small, tight courtroom, wood on the walls, straight-backed benches, a formal hush to the air. Renata sat at the plaintiff's table next to Rowan Ashby. Her dress was black, her makeup almost non-existent, her hair drawn back without fuss. She looked like someone hollowed out by grief, pale, diminished, fragile. Every bit of it was theater. Judge Sterling Voss presided, no connection to Renata's family. Early 60s silver at his temples. A gaze that cut through noise, a judge with a well-known intolerance for theatrics. Ashby went first. The picture he drew was of a grieving woman preyed upon by a scheming family that had turned a sick man against his own wife. Your Honor, Donovan Callaway put this will together just 30 days after he learned he was dying. He was emotionally shattered, his body beginning to fail him, and in no condition to resist outside pressure. What was imposed on Mrs. Voss, the round-the-clock monitoring, the spending controls, the intrusions into her private life, rises to the level of the unconscionable. This document does not capture Donovan Callaway's genuine wishes. It captures what his father and his lawyers wanted. Elliot got to his feet. Your Honor, the evidence points somewhere else entirely. Donovan Callaway signed his will on February 15, 2023, 30 days after the diagnosis? Yes. But those were 30 days during which he remained completely in command of his faculties. Medical records confirm it. 3 independent attorneys sat in the room as he signed and will attest to what they witnessed. And Donovan didn't leave us guessing. He put his reasoning down in writing. He found out what Renata had been doing in January 2023. He made a choice: give her a full year, one genuine chance to show she valued their marriage and the principles he lived by. She didn't take it. Not because of the surveillance, but because she kept seeing another man ran through money she'd agreed not to spend, and looked him in the face and lied. Elliot walked the court through it all. The Loveland photographs, the July 25th metadata, the boutique confrontation, the encrypted exchange with those unmistakable words. 11 more months. Renata's gaze stayed fixed on some point in the distance, her jaw clenched. Judge Voss tracked every word, pen moving steadily. When the last argument landed, he settled back. This is a complex case, he said. I'm going to need both parties to submit additional documentation. I want medical evaluations, witness depositions, and a complete accounting of the estate's transfer. We'll reconvene for a formal trial on December 20th, 2023. Until then, the current status of the estate remains unchanged. The gavel came down. Walking out, Renata swung around and found my eyes. What I saw in hers was cold fury anger that had calcified into something hard and unforgiving. I held it for a beat. Then I turned away and kept walking. Elliot fell in beside me and squeezed my shoulder. "We're going to win this, Warren." I gave him a nod. I had no doubt. December 20th, 2023. The full trial, Larimer County District Court. I got there early with Elliot. Vivian Calloway and Clifford Draper found us in the lobby. Down the hall, Renata had arrived with Rowan Ashby and 2 more attorneys flanking her, a show of force deliberately assembled. She wore a navy suit, her face giving away nothing. This room was larger than the one from October. Judge Loretta Wyndham was on the bench mid-50s, a crop of short gray hair, wire-rimmed glasses perched on her nose, known throughout the legal community for decisions that were painstaking and fair. At exactly 9 o'clock, she settled into her chair and brought the room to order. 6 hours. That's how long it went. Ashby came in swinging. His version of Donovan was a man eaten alive by sickness, poisoned by bitterness, and led around by his father. Your Honor. Donovan Calloway put this will to paper just weeks after a terminal cancer diagnosis was handed to him. He was emotionally devastated, physical outside influence. Warren Calloway turned his son's fear and grief against his own wife. What's in this document is not sound judgment. It is the product of a dying man who was not left alone to think for himself. Part of me wanted to say something sharp. The suggestion that I had bent my son's will to my own purposes was almost too absurd to sit with, but I held my tongue and let Elliot work. He spent the next 4 hours pulling Ashby's case apart at the seams, starting with the medicine. Your Honor, Donovan Calloway received his stage 4 cancer diagnosis on January 8, 2023. He drafted his will on February 15th, more than a month, on a stretch in which his condition had found a degree of stability. His oncologist, Dr. Leonard Okafor, submitted a sworn affidavit confirming that Donovan was fully lucid, mentally competent, and capable of making informed decisions throughout February and March. Cognitive impairment. The record contains nothing of the sort. Then came the letters. Donovan sat down over several weeks and wrote out his thinking in longhand. He describes the moment he understood what Renata had done, the deliberate choice he made to offer her a road back, and the hope he held that she would value honesty over whatever she was protecting. A man under duress doesn't write like that. That's the voice of someone who knows exactly what he's doing and why. Elliot then laid out the evidence of betrayal and sequenced the affair with Bryce Holman, which had begun in August 2022. Garrett Nolan's surveillance records, the Loveland photographs dated July 15, 2023, the metadata trail running through July 25th, and the encrypted messages that spelled out the timeline as clearly as anything 11 more months. He brought in the boutique security footage too, Renata's outburst caught on camera, and her own words about riding out the compliance window. Then Elliot called up the 3 attorneys who had been in the room when Donovan signed. One by one, they confirmed the same thing he'd been steady, certain entirely himself. Attorney Colette Waverly put it plainly, "I've witnessed hundreds of estate signings over my career. Donovan Calloway was one of the most composed and certain clients I've ever met." When Elliot sat down, the room felt weighted, the kind of silence that follows when the facts have been laid out, and there's nothing left to argue about their shape. Then it was Renata's turn. She took the stand while Ashby fed her soft questions designed to open her up. She faced the judge directly, and the tears were already there before she began. "I love Donovan," she said, her voice giving out on the last word. "I know I made mistakes. I was lonely. I was scared. But I didn't deserve to lose everything because I reached out to an old friend at the lowest point of my life." She wanted to be seen as a widow. The system had failed a flawed, grieving human being made to suffer for it. Then Elliot rose for cross-examination. "Mrs. Voss," Elliot said, his voice level, and measured, "Do you deny meeting Bryce Holman at a restaurant in Loveland, Colorado on July 15th, 2023? Renata stared across at him. Her mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. "Do you deny sending encrypted messages to Mr. Holman as recently as July 25th, 2023, 10 days after you claimed the relationship had ended?" Not a word. "Do you deny attempting to purchase a $26,000 handbag while claiming to honor your late husband's values?" Renata dropped her eyes to her hands. She offered nothing. Judge Wyndham watched her without blinking. After a silence that stretched uncomfortably long, Wyndham spoke. The court will need time to review all submitted evidence thoroughly. I will announce my ruling at 4 o'clock this afternoon, December 20th, 2023. We walked out and waited. The stretch between October's preliminary hearing and the formal trial on December 20th, 2023, had felt like a season that wouldn't end. And then, once the trial wrapped up that morning, the crawl toward 4 o'clock felt even worse. Through those 2 months, I prayed every night. I asked Donovan to forgive me if I had misread anything, if somewhere along the way I had gotten his wishes wrong. All I wanted was to honor him properly. In late November and into early December, messages began reaching me from the scholarship recipients. Isabel Reyes sent a photograph of herself, standing outside the University of New Mexico Engineering Building. She wrote, "Mr. Calloway, I got straight A's this semester. Thank you for believing in me." Damon Whitfield from New York wrote to say he'd been accepted into a renewable energy research lab. Cleo Navarro from Arizona sent a handwritten card. "This scholarship saved my family. My mom doesn't have to work 2 jobs anymore." Every one of those messages put something solid back under my feet. I knew we were doing the right thing. Elliot was anxious, but his confidence held. "The law is on our side, Warren. Wyndham is fair. She'll see the truth." Vivian and Clifford kept their heads down, preparing the groundwork for the foundation's 2nd year. Applications were already pouring in, more than 300 at that point. On the morning of December 20th, we returned to Larimer County District Court at 9 o'clock. 6 hours of testimony and arguments followed. Renata looked more drawn and hollowed out than I had ever seen her. When proceedings wound down around 3 o'clock, Judge Wyndham told the room clock. We withdrew to a conference room. Elliot went back through his notes. Vivienne had her phone out. Clifford couldn't stay still. I sat without speaking, working on breathing steadily. At 4 o'clock, we filed back in. Renata was already at the plaintiff's table beside Rowan Ashby, eyes forward, face drained of color. Judge Wyndham entered. The room rose. She settled into her chair, opened a thick folder, and let her gaze move across the room. "I have carefully reviewed all evidence, testimony, and legal arguments presented in this case," she began. "The court's findings are as follows." She paused to adjust her glasses. First, regarding the validity of Donovan Calloway's will. The evidence shows that Mr. Calloway executed this will on February 15th, 2023, more than 1 month after his cancer diagnosis. Medical records confirm that he was fully competent and lucid at the time. 3 independent attorneys witnessed the signing and testified to his mental clarity and intent. The will was drafted in compliance with Colorado estate law. The court finds no basis for claims of undue influence or diminished capacity. Something tightened in my chest. Second, regarding the conditions imposed on Mrs. Renata Voss. While these conditions were strict, they were not illegal. Mr. Calloway had the legal right to attach conditions to his bequest. The surveillance measures were disclosed and conducted within the legal boundaries. The court finds these conditions valid. Wyndham turned a page. Third, regarding Mrs. Voss's compliance, the evidence is overwhelming. Mrs. Voss engaged in an extramarital relationship that began in August 2022 and continued through July 2023. She attempted excessive expenditures inconsistent with the will's terms. She provided false statements regarding the termination of that relationship. The court finds that Mrs. Voss violated the conditions clearly and repeatedly. She looked up from the page. Therefore, the court rules as follows. The lawsuit filed by Renata Marie Voss is dismissed in its entirety. The last will and testament of Donovan James Calloway is upheld as valid and binding. The transfer of Mr. Calloway's estate to the Calloway Memorial Scholarship Foundation is confirmed as lawful and irrevocable. The gavel struck hard. It was done. I let out a breath that felt like it had been held for months. I reached for Elliot's hand and gripped it. His eyes had gone wet. Across the aisle, Renata got to her feet slowly. She wavered for just a moment, steadied herself against the table, then turned and walked out without looking back at anyone. I watched her go. What I felt wasn't satisfaction. It was relief pure and uncomplicated. Life found its way back to something like stillness after that. In January 2024, exactly 1 year from the day my son learned he was dying, I was sitting in the foundation's office in Columbus, turning over everything we'd been through. The Calloway Memorial Scholarship Foundation had grown into one of the most respected programs of its kind in the country, dedicated to economically disadvantaged students. The first 64 recipients were making their mark at some of the top universities in the nation: MIT Stanford, the University of Ohio, Georgia Tech, Caltech, Carnegie Mellon. Vivian knocked and came in carrying a thick binder. "Warren, I wanted to show you the latest numbers. We've received over 500 applications for next year's scholarships. That's more than double last year." I shook my head. 500. Clifford Draper stepped into the doorway not long after. "Warren, I just got off the phone with Google. They want to partner with us 10 additional scholarships per year, full rides plus paid summer internships. Microsoft reached out last week," he continued. "Tesla the week before. These companies want to invest in the same students your son believed in." I leaned back and tried to take it in. "Donovan, look what you started." After they were gone, I sat there alone, watching snow come down over Columbus. I thought about my son, who he'd been the person he'd grown into. His real legacy wasn't Callaway Dynamics, and it wasn't the $118 million. It was opportunity. Compassion made concrete. 64 young people, soon to be many more, who would never have to weigh their dreams against their family's survival. I pulled open my desk drawer and took out the letter Donovan had left me. The page had gone soft at the folds from how many times I'd unfolded it. "Dad, if you're reading this, I'm gone, but I need you to know something. I love you. I'm proud of the man you are. You taught me that genius without compassion is worthless. You taught me that true success isn't measured in dollars, it's measured in the lives you touch. I'm asking you to carry that forward. Love, always, Donovan." I pressed it against my chest and said quietly, "I did what you asked, son. I hope you're proud." 2 months on, in March 2024, a year to the month since Donovan had left us, I put together a memorial ceremony in Columbus, out near Hoover Reservoir, a place that had meant something to him when he was young. The hall was unpretentious, but it felt right. The 64 students filled the front rows. Vivian, Clifford, Brooke, and Elliot were all there. I stood at the podium. 1 year ago, I lost my only son. He was the greatest pride of my life. My voice broke on the last word. He taught me that real love isn't about holding on, it's about letting go. He taught me that true legacy isn't money or buildings. It's what we leave behind for the next generation. I looked out at the students in those front rows. He wanted to give all of you a chance, not potential, and no resources. He believed that genius without compassion is worthless. Several of them were already crying young people who had never once been in the same room as him. Isabel Reyes, 18, came up to the podium in a University of New Mexico sweatshirt. "Mr. Callaway, I never met your son, but I feel his love every day. This scholarship changed my family's life. My mom doesn't cry at night anymore. My little brother tells people his sister goes to college. That's because of him." She looked straight at me. "I promise I'll work hard, help others, and make sure his legacy keeps growing." When the speeches were finished, we went outside to the shore of Hoover Reservoir. Elliot and Clifford carried a young maple tree. Vivienne brought a granite plaque. We dug the hole together and set the tree into the ground, students taking turns with the shovel, packing the soil around the roots. Vivienne laid the plaque at its base. "In memory of Donovan James Callaway, 1989 to 2023. Genius with compassion." I got down on one knee and pressed my palm flat against the slender trunk, barely more than a sapling, but it had time. "This tree will grow with your dreams," I whispered, "and that's how he'll live forever." People drifted away in ones and twos until the shore was quiet. I stood there alone beside the tree, watching the gray water move. "Your work isn't finished, son." I said it softly into the wind. "It's only just begun, and I'll make sure it never stops." 7 months after that, in October 2024, we held the Foundation's first anniversary celebration in Denver. More than 200 people filled the room, the 64 first-year students 70, from the second cohort, corporate sponsors, and press. Vivienne took the stage. "In the past year, we've awarded 134 full-ride scholarships. The combined value is over $26 million. 100% of our first-year students have maintained a GPA above 3.5. Clifford followed with the partnership news. Google, Microsoft, and Tesla have committed $15 million over 3 years, potentially doubling our scholarships annually. Brooke put on a video of student testimonials. Tamsin Bellamy from Johns Hopkins said, "This scholarship gave me the belief that someone believed in me. Emilio Fuentes from UC Berkeley promised, "I'm going to create scholarships for other kids just like Mr. Calloway did." When they called me up to cut the anniversary cake, I stepped in front of the crowd. A year ago, I was sure I'd lost everything, but up at that podium, I understood my son hadn't left me empty-handed. He'd left me 134 young people already reshaping the world. He'd left me hope. My voice gave out on me. "Son, if you're watching, you didn't just build a scholarship fund. You built a family." I cut the cake while the room filled with applause. 2 months on, in December 2024, I was at home in Columbus getting ready for Christmas when the phone rang. California number. "Mr. Calloway. This is Beckett Loring. I was just accepted into a NASA internship, and I had to call you." I smiled through the tears. "Congratulations, son." He would be so proud. After we hung up, I reached for Donovan's photo album. There he was at 5, clutching a toy airplane. At 12, hot dogs in hand at a Clippers game. At 30, scissors raised at his company's ribbon cutting. The last shot showed him sure of himself, beaming. On the back in his hand, "Dad, thank you for believing in me." I pressed it against my chest. "Thank you for showing me how to love the right way." Send the doorbell went. Vivian, Clifford, Brooke, and Elliot were on the step arms loaded with gifts and cookies. "Mr. Calloway," Vivian said warmly, "we weren't going to let you spend Christmas alone. We're family. Come in, please." They warmed the whole house. Elliot paused at Donovan's photo. "He'd be proud of what you've done." "What we've done," I said. My son hadn't just endowed a fund. He'd brought a family into being held together by love, compassion, and a purpose we all shared. Snow falling outside, warmth inside. We were home. Looking back, there's something I want to pass on, something 2 years of pain and anger and finally peace taught me. Don't make my mistake. Don't give betrayal the years you have left. When I learned what Renata had done to Donovan, I could have turned bitter and stayed that way. Some might call what I did dad revenge, the courtroom fight, laying bare her lies, watching the inheritance disappear from her hands. But that isn't what it was. It was about keeping my son's wishes and guarding what he'd built his life around. The real lesson here isn't punishment. It's purpose. Donovan taught me that love isn't holding on. It's giving people the freedom to decide who they are, even when they decide badly. He offered Renata a road back. She chose not to take it and lived with what followed. But the thing I'm proudest of wasn't winning in court. It was building something she could never reach, a legacy of possibility for 134 students who will change the world. God turns our deepest wounds into something we didn't expect. I believe he led Donovan to create this foundation, knowing that even after he was gone, my son would go on feeding dreams that poverty had tried to starve. So, if someone wrongs, you don't spend what remains of your life fighting them. Fight for something larger. Shape your story into something the pain can't outlast. Build a legacy that turns grief into grace. Donovan didn't leave me with revenge. He left me a family of 134 souls who swear they'll pay it forward, who remind me daily that genius without compassion is worthless. But compassion with action can change everything. That's the story I choose to tell. If you've stayed with me this far, thank you. Truly, this story cost me more than I can put into words, and I hope some part of it found you where you needed it. 2 years of grief of courtrooms and silence and long nights wondering whether I'd gotten it right. I believe God placed this burden on me, not to break me, but to build something through me. I came close to letting the anger win, but what Donovan left behind wouldn't let me stay there. The pain was real. The purpose that came out of it was more real. Here is what I learned and what I'd pass on to anyone carrying something heavy. When someone betrays a good man, don't become the story of their betrayal. Become the story of what was built after. True dad's revenge isn't a courtroom victory. It's a legacy so solid that nothing the other person did can touch it. If your grief has nowhere to go, give it somewhere to go. Turn it outward. There are people waiting for the door you could open. And if you ever wonder whether one person's life can matter that much, look at what one young man dying quietly in a Fort Collins apartment managed to set in motion for 134 strangers who never even knew his name. These are the father stories worth telling, not the ones where a dad gets even, the ones where a dad and a son build something that keeps growing long after they're gone. If this story moved you, leave a comment below. Tell me what stayed with you. And if you know someone who needs to hear that grief can become something good, please pass it along. Subscribe to His Hidden Revenge so you don't miss what comes next. Thank you for listening. Take care of yourselves and each other.